Hello, greetings to every one of you, and then welcome to our today's class. This is Mr. Godwill Yako, speaking on the relationship between the legislative, the executive, and the judicial branches in the government of Cameroon. We are looking at the relationship that exists between the various arms of government in Cameroon. And so today in this class, there are a number of things I want you to understand. And then actually, I want you to really understand it to the bottom of everything. And that is why I will be very open to questions. By the time we must have finished a greater portion of all our courses, we will have interactive classes where you will be able to ask questions. But from now on, you can drop your question in the comment. You can drop your question in the forum. You can drop your question to us personally, either directly to me or the course master, anybody taking a particular course. And I assure you, you are going to have your response as soon as possible. So, dear friends, dear colleagues, dear aspirants of the various professions of administration and public service, today let us dive into studying the relationship that exists between the various arms of government. For example, in Cameroon, we have three arms of government that you know about. We have the legislative arm of government, we have the executive and the judicial arm of the government. And in Cameroon, the relationship that exists between the legislative, the executive, and the judiciary is guided by something that is known as the principle of separation of powers. I really want you to get, to understand this very well. The principle of separation of powers. What is this principle all about? The principle of separation of power was being propounded by a British philosopher by name John Locke. I am not preaching separation of power in this lesson. What I'm preaching is the relationship between the arms of government. But then, in studying this, I have to make you understand certain aspects of separation of power. And subsequently, we are going to have that topic, that the separation of power, as a lesson to exhaust. But for the purpose of understanding this lesson, I'll say some things that you need to know as basic ground level for the principle of separation of power. And the first thing is, it was being propounded by who? A British philosopher, a thinker, known as John Locke. John Locke brought up the principle of separation of power, where he said, if a state power, in order to avoid arbitrary governance, bad governance, in order to avoid things like the abuse of power, in order to avoid abuse of discretion by the administration or the government, the state power should be separated between three arms of government. That means we should, according to John Locke, he said state power should be separated between the legislative, the judiciary, and the federative. He cited their function. He said the executive, starting from the legislative, they should make the law. Then the judiciary should interpret the law and make judgment in accordance with the law. Then the federative should be responsible for international relations. This was the idea of John Locke. Then, a few moments or a few years later, another philosopher, a philosopher from another school of thought, a French philosopher this time around, after reading the book of John Locke, he now wrote his own book known as The Spirit of the Law. This guy, this French ideologist, this French philosopher was known as Charles Louis de Secondat. Charles Louis de Secondat, popularly known as Montesquieu. Montesquieu wrote a book titled L'Esprit de Loi, in English, The Spirit of the Law. Montesquieu cited in his book that state power should be divided between three arms. According to Montesquieu, now listen, there were three arms of the government, namely the legislative, the judiciary, and the executive. So these three arms of government we are using today is being drafted from Montesquieu, from Montesquieu's principle of separation of power. And Montesquieu got his inspiration from reading the work of John Locke. Montesquieu further said that power, in order to avoid arbitrary governance, power should stop power. That is, power should halt power. And what did he mean by power should stop power? He was just trying to say that the same person who makes the law should not implement that law. And the same person who makes the law should not be the one to interpret what that law is saying. So now we should have a different branch, a different body of persons who are making the law. We should have a different body of persons who interpret the law, and then a different body of persons who are executing the law. This was Montesquieu's idea when he said power should stop power. It means by the time you have made the law, that is all about your own. Now, implementation of that law is in the hand of someone else. And therefore, Montesquieu cited that the legislative should make law and control the government. And that is the function of the legislative arm of government. In Cameroon, we call them the parliament. The parliament is made up of the upper house of assembly, the upper house of assembly and the lower house of assembly. We have the upper house of assembly known as the house of senate, made up of 100 senators. The senators, when you read the code on the general code on decentralization, or the general code on regional and local authorities, when you read that code, it clearly states there that the Senate shall represent the regions and the councils. So the Senate is made up of 100 members. And those 100 members, how do they have their office? We are going to treat this better under parliamentary law. But for now, they get their office, 70 of them get their office through election, and 30 of them get their office through appointment by His Excellency the President of the Republic. According to the Constitution, the Constitution says that the President shall appoint 30 senators, 3 per region. And since we have 10 regions in Cameroon, 3 in each region, it makes 30. The president appoint 30 senators, and the other 70 senators, they are elected by indirect universal suffrage. By the time we do political system, we will understand what universal suffrages are, because we have direct universal suffrage and indirect universal suffrage. For the meantime, note this down, pen it down. Direct universal suffrage is when you go by yourself and vote. But in indirect, here we have example, the presidential election. On the day they are voting for the president, you who have registered for voting, you go by yourself. You go and vote either a CPDM, MRC, PCRM, SDF, and so on. You go and vote by yourself. But in indirect universal suffrage, like in the case of the senators, you don't vote the senators directly. in Cameroon. You vote first of all councillors. Those councillors, they are called grand electors. You go and vote for them. Then it's those grand electors now that will go ahead now and vote for the senators. So here we call it indirect universal suffrage, and that's how the election of the senators they take place in Cameroon, and that's how those 100 senators they come about. What about the lower house of assembly? I also like to mention something very important you need to note down is that the Senate, is headed by a president of the Senate. For example, presently the president of the Senate is Maseniat Jifenji, Honorable Maseniat Jifenji. He's the head of the Senate. And also take note, the head of the Senate is the second personality in the Republic of Cameroon. In Cameroon, the first personality is His Excellency the President of the Republic, a ceremonial figure. The second personality is the President of the Senate. Some of you are bragging around, you are thinking that the president, after the president in this country is the prime minister. Zero. Prime minister is number 5 in personality. In authority. You get. So the president of the republic is the first authority, followed by the president of the Senate. And in case of presidential vacancy, that is, if the president dies within his mandate, I'm just giving this additionally, or a permanent incapability for him to run his office, the person who will be signing as the interim president until the new election is organized and carried out is the president of the Senate. So, for example, right now that election is still approaching, if there is presidential vacancy in the country, directly is the president of the Senate that will be signing as the interim president of the republic. As interim president, you are not the full, you are just there as interim president, meaning you are just there to as a representative president while waiting for election for the people to vote their new president. And in case the president of the Senate is unable to exercise this function, it will be exercised by his deputy or assistant. So you see, you have to take down a lot of things there. Then now coming to the National Assembly, the National Assembly is made up of 180 members, and all these 180 members, they are gotten through election. And which kind of election takes place here? Direct universal suffrage. They are voted by direct universal suffrage, and they are voted through the majority vote cast. So, and also they are voted from a different political parties. For example, in the case of Cameroon, we have CBDM that occupy the highest number of seats. CBDM alone occupies 58 seats presently at the National Assembly out of the 180. Then the other seats are occupied by other parties, other political parties as well as there are other political parties that are not even represented at the National Assembly. So that is what how the legislative arm of government is being organized in Cameroon. In Cameroon, we have a bicameral parliament. What do we mean by bicameral? Bicameral parliament means we have a parliament that is made up of 2 houses. At first, in Cameroon, we were having a monocameral parliament until 2013, when the first senatorial election took place. At first, we were having only our 180 members of the National House of Assembly. Yes, headed by Honorable Kavayege Jibril. And the Senate was being created by the 1996 Constitution. After creation, it was not after it was being created. It was not actually being put in place until 2013. The first senatorial election took place in Cameroon 2013, and we voted for our senators, and the president also appointed his 30. We had 100 senators, and the president of the Senate right from 2013 till today is who? Honorable Masenia Jifenji. so you see that before then we were under monocameralism. We're having a monocameral parliament because the parliament had only one house. But today we have the upper house of assembly and the lower house of assembly, making it a bicameral parliament. Bicameral, by means two, camera mean houses, so bicameral mean a parliament that has two houses. The other day during your very first class in criminal law, we said something about the nature of the judiciary in Cameroon. We said Cameroon has a bijural nature. What do we mean by the bijural nature? Because two kind of laws are applied in Cameroon. Yes, we inherited our most of our things in Cameroon. They are heritage. Yes, so even our language, they are heritage, right? So we inherited the after German annexation, because during German annexation and administration in Cameroon, German governors were being assigned. For example, the first German governor in Cameroon was Julius von Soden. The German governors, they administered Cameroon, and they were administering using German laws and were being imposed to speak what German language. But now, after Cameroon was being partitioned to between Britain and France. First of all, as mandated territory under the League of Nations, and finally as trust territories under the United Nations Organization. We inherited their languages, and today we have bilingualism. We speak both English and French. We also inherited their legal system or their laws. So as a result, we inherited two different kind of laws, which makes us a bijural system. So we have a bicameral parliament and a bijural judicial system. Okay, that is it for the parliament. What about the executive? The executive arm of government is made up of the central administration, the administrative arm of the government. And then we have judiciary. The judicial branch of the government is made up of the various courts, with the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is at the top. When we're talking about the courts in Cameroon, the highest court of the land is the Supreme Court, with the Constitutional Council at its corner. Yes. Then we have the various court, like the Court of Appeal, Administrative Court, the High Courts, Court of First Instance, and also on the military tribunals, Court of Impeachment of the President and the Prime Minister, and so on. So now I come back to today's lesson. And in today's lesson, we are looking at the relationship that does exist between these three arms of government. Okay? Remember, I said when I was talking about Montesquieu, in his book known as The Spirit of the Law, he said state power should be divided between three arms: the legislative, executive, and judiciary. The legislative should do two things: make law and control the government. The executive should execute the law and carry out diplomatic and international relations. So that is why today, if you see an ambassador is being accredited to Cameroon, he's being accredited to who? The head of state, who is the executive, the head of the executive. So the executive, they are the ones responsible for what? International and diplomatic relations between other Cameroon and other countries. They are also what? Responsible for implementing the law or executing the law. Now, what about the judiciary? They are there to do two things also: to interpret the law. The law is not interpreted at the National Assembly. The National Assembly, they simply make those laws. Those laws are being interpreted in the courts by those who are working within the judicial arm of the government. Take special notes. So now, the relationship that exists between these three branches of government is being guided by this principle known as the principle of separation of power, abbreviated SOP. Most of the time, you may sometimes see it as SOP, or you abbreviate it as SOP, but in the during examination periods, always write in full. And the principle of separation of power is there to ensure that no single branch of the government becomes too powerful, and that they have a mechanism that they are collaborating, and by the time that collaboration is taking place and no arm of the government become too powerful, at the end result is that democracy is promoted. At the end result is going to be what? The respect for human right. The end result is going to be what? A promotion of the rule of law and good governance. So when you now when you now read through the 1996 Constitution as amended in the 14th of April 2008, you see it outlined the powers and responsibility of each branch of the government. It outlined the powers and responsibilities of the president, that of the legislative and the judiciary as well. So let me say something about this principle of separation of power. The principle of separation of power is guided by three things. The basic notion of the principle of separation of power is to the effect that number one, no one person should be a member of the two arms of government. That means no one person should be a member of parliament and again a member having a position in the executive arm of government. Take it down. Number two, for an effective principle of separation of power, number two, no, the judiciary should not, another branch of government should not be given the power to do what another branch of government is doing. So we should not allow the executive to make law. We should not allow the judiciary to execute any law. We should not allow the legislative to execute any law and so on. So each branch of government should be independent, working, carrying out their own function. Then number three now is that there should be an effective system of check and balances. What is check and balances? Check and balances is a mechanism that each branch of government can use to control the other. There should be a way that the legislative can control the government or the executive. And remember, according to Montesquieu, the legislative should make law and do what? Control the government. And that's why the prime minister, the head of government, the prime minister appears in front of the parliament once every year to give an account of government activities. And the parliament also have the right to pass a vote of no confidence against the prime minister. And if that vote is being passed, the prime minister will automatically be dismissed with his ministers. And the president will have to appoint other ministers now. Or again, the president can still reappoint that same prime minister and ask him to form another government. So you see that this is a way of controlling the government. A way that the legislative can use to control. We're going to demystify that through our lesson of today. We're starting with the separation of power. And in Cameroon system, the separation of power is enshrined in the constitution. Why? Because the constitution, when you just look at the constitution, even at first sight, when I say at first sight, meaning you have not even read in details. When you just open the constitution, you'll see first the preamble. Next, you see state and sovereignty. Next, you see the executive. Under that, you will see the presidency and the prime ministry. Then next, you see what? The legislative. And then you see what? The judiciary. Then you see now those relationships. So you see that the constitution has actually splitted the government into these three different branches. So that's why we can freely say that the principle of separation of power is being enshrined in what? In the constitution, in the 1996 Constitution. I've already explained all this. So Now we'll just go directly to the relationship that exists between the legislative and executive. I've also explained already. And what I said is that what the legislative, they have the power to control the executive arm of government. They have the power to control. Number one, how do they control? Remember, we have spoken about sources of administrative law. Under sources of administrative law, a legislative text was a source of administrative law. What does this mean? It means the parliament, they have the right to make law to control the executive arm of government. Because any legislative law, that any text that have been passed by the parliament, uh, that is regulating the activities of the administration, that constitute a source of administrative law or administrative law itself. Therefore, you see, that's one of the ways the legislative they use to control the government. Number two, I said the prime minister, head of government, he shows up. He shows up at the National Assembly in one of their sessions. He shows up at the National Assembly once every year. And I even told you that the legislative arm, the parliament, they have the power to pass the vote of no confidence against the prime minister. When the prime minister shows up before the parliament, he presents the government budget. He presents government activities. He presents the government budget for the following year, and that budget must be adopted by the parliament. So you see that any budget, that Cameroon is implementing has been validated by the parliament. So you see, the parliament, they play a vital role in controlling the government. All right. That's the relationship that exists between the legislative and executive. But now, realize that I've spoken only on one side. It's as if it's only the parliament that can control the executive, as if there are also other ways through which you will see that the executive, they also control the parliament. For example, number one, imagine that some of the members of parliament are being appointed by His Excellency the President of the Republic, who is an executive, the head of the executive, but he is appointing members in the legislative arm of government. He appoints up to 30 senators in the upper house or assembly, for that matter. So here you see that it's a mechanism for the president of the republic to or the executive to control some of the kind of things that happen at the parliament. All right, so that's one. Yes. Let's look at the role of legislature in relation to the executive. The legislative, they make the law, right? They make the law, and then when they make the law, those laws are being promulgated by His Excellency President de la République. Yeah. Then they approve appointments. The legislative, they approve some of the president's appointment, like sometimes appointment of ministers and so on. And but now you need to know that the National Assembly must confirm certain appointments, including those of prime minister and other senior state officials. Yes. Then we have spoken about accountability, because the prime minister, he has an accountability role before the parliament. He and when he shows up before the parliament, he answers questions. He answers both oral and written questions from the members of parliament. Yes. And I said that they can pass a censure of no confidence, or a vote of no confidence, to remove the president, the prime minister and his ministers. This motion of censure is enshrined in the constitution. If you read Article 34 of the 1996 constitution, is all about that, a vote of no confidence against the prime minister. Yes. Then the legislative, they also control government budget. I've already explained that. And then now, how does the executive act in relation to the legislative. How does the executive control the legislative now? Let's turn it now the other way, and try to weigh it on a balance and see what happens. We have policy proposal and law initiative. That's one. The president and the prime minister, they submit proposed laws. What they submit to the parliament, they are not laws. When the president can think, can imagine, because legislative procedure can be initiated by the members of parliament, or the head of the executive. Yes. So the president of the republic or the prime minister, they can propose a law to the parliament. That but we think you people, we can legislate this, we can make this a law. You see, they can propose laws. Now, those laws that are being made by the parliament, they are being implemented by the executive. So you see, it is another way of controlling the legislative, right? Because you make the law, I implement the law, right? When you make the law, I'm the one now to implement. So when you are making the law, you know that you are not the one to implement this law. So in making that law, you make sure that the law will be for the good of the people of Cameroon. Yes. Because they are going to be implemented by someone else. Then now, still looking at the relationship between or the powers that the executive they have over the parliament, is what the veto power. I have to explain to you now what veto means. I'll be saying the president of the republic, he has the authority to, he is the one that promulgate laws. He is the one, like the laws. By the time we do parliamentary law, we are going to come out with the processes involved in the making of a law, and then you will see how the processes involved in the legislative arm of the government, how they actually pass bills into law. Those bills, by the time the parliament they have voted so a particular bill, it is not yet called law. It's not yet a law. By the time they vote, they used to vote. They pass a bill across and they vote that bill. But after voting, they will send the bill to the president. It's the president that will promulgate the bill into law. Good. So you see that you make law, I'm the one to promulgate it. It's a way for me to control you. I think you get. You make the law, you are the legislative, the parliament. You make the law, you send it to me for me to promulgate the law. Good. So it's a way of, that's what we call veto power. You have the power to promulgate. You have the power to either accept or decline. That's what we call veto power. So the president of the republic has veto power over the parliament. So bills that are being passed by the parliament are being brought before the president for him to promulgate them into law. That means for him to veto them. And then now, when the bill comes to the president of the republic, the constitution says that the president of the republic may either promulgate that bill into law, or the president of the republic may send that bill to the constitutional council to check the constitutionality of that law. That's the duty of the constitutional council. They are there to maintain the integrity of the constitution. So if the president is saying that this law will it really be constitutional? Is it in accordance with our constitution, which is the highest law of the land? He will send it to the constitutional council to control the constitutionality. And in that control, they can either remove, if the law is unconstitutional, they can cancel it. And if only a certain part of the law is unconstitutional, they can remove that part and send it back to the parliament. Also, the president of the republic can also decide not to send the bill to the constitutional council for control of constitutionality. He can still send it back to the parliament, to the National Assembly, for them to pass across a vote and then promulgate the bill into law. And there's a time limit after which, if the President of the Republic does not promulgate the bill into law, the Speaker of the National House of Assembly has that power to do it when it comes back to him. Also, I will now talk on regulatory power. What is regulatory power? The power to make law is not in the notes, so I'm just explaining now. You just get the point. Regulatory power is the power to make law by way of a decree. Two people make decrees in Cameroon. We have presidential decree and prime ministerial decree. Ministers, they pass what is known as order. We have ministerial order, ministerial decisions, ministerial circulars. So in Cameroon, two people that they can pass a decree, and a decree is a law. A decree is a what? Is a law. And two people in Cameroon can pass decrees. We have President of the Republic and a Prime Minister. So they have what is known as regulatory power. So now, if we are saying that the arm of government that makes the law is the parliament, but now the president and the prime minister, who are members of the executive, why then should they be making law again by way of a decree? So you see that it's a way of them reacting to, like, interacting together. You get the point. The prime minister can make a law by way of a decree. The president can also make a law by way of a decree. Also, not forgetting ordinances, because it also falls under regulatory power. Ordinances are laws passed by the President of the Republic in an area that is reserved for the parliament. So ordinances are actually law in nature. Yes, they are being passed by the President of the Republic. That is to say, law that was supposed to be passed by the parliament, but now the president passes that law, or the parliament sometimes may even give the privilege to the president to pass that law. For example, we have the 1974 Land Ordinance to control what? The ownership of land and the procedure to follow in order to acquire a land title in Cameroon. And you actually know that the procedure, acquisition of a land title in Cameroon is an administrative procedure before the Ministry of Land and Tenure, MINCAP. So now that ordinance is actually guiding on land titles, you get, and the ownership of land. The bill could also be passed by the parliament, but it was an ordinance. It is an ordinance because it was being passed by who? The President of the Republic. So now, without wasting of time, we will continue to what? The executive versus judiciary relationship. How does the executive interact with the judiciary? We'll look to and fro. We'll look on one side, and we'll look on the one side and then on the other side. I'll just be talking. When my voice will finish, I will end the class and continue one time, some other time, of course. Now, I'll be saying that the relationship between the executive and judiciary is very crucial. Here is crucial for what? The maintenance of the rule of law. Remember, I think I've always explained what the rule of law is all about to you people. What is the rule of law? What does the rule of law imply? What does it really mean? The rule of law. Under the rule of law, we have some principles. I think I've spoken about that already. And not to make our lesson lengthy, I'll just go ahead. Because under this, I'll be saying two things: the rule of the executive in relation to the judiciary, and the rule of the judiciary in relation to the executive. So let's start with one. What are the rules of the executive in relation to the judiciary? Number one, the President of the Republic, who is an executive member or the head of the executive, he is involved in the appointment of judges. For example, even the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court is appointed by the President. So you see, it's a relationship, it's a role of the executive in relation to the judiciary. Also, the president or the executive, they ensure that judicial decisions, especially those decisions that are issued by the Supreme Court and then some of the lower courts also, they ensure that those court decisions are being implemented. Remember that the executive, they are the ones to implement the law. So by the time the court already holds that they already hold a particular decision, that decision is now implemented by the judiciary, by the executive. So the enforcement of court decision lies in the hands of the executive. Good. Then now we'll look at what pardons, grants, and pardons. What are pardons? The executive, or particularly straight to the point, the president, he has the power to grant pardon to prisoners. So he can grant pardons, or otherwise we call it clemency. He can grant a clemency to individuals who are being convicted of crime. So this this power is normally it is a kind of power that, well, normally it is we cannot really say that it is really the best. But then the fact that the president of the republic has the power to grant pardons or clemency to individuals who are being convicted for crimes, nonetheless, this power should be exercised with a lot of caution in accordance with the principles of justice. Yeah, we can now talk of emergency power and national security. The executive, they are the one that holds significant power when it comes to matters relating to national defense, public order, security, and all the like, and public services. Now, let's look at the role that the judiciary they play. The role of the judiciary in relation to the executive. All these things we are looking at now, we call it what? System of check and balances. I want to make you understand. By the time I was talking on the principle of separation of power, I mentioned what? The system of check and balances. The principle of separation of power is about these three things. And I said 1, 2, number 3, I said what? They see a proper or adequate system of check and balances. That each branch of government should have a mechanism that they can use to control the other branch of government. So that's what we are demystifying right now. Now, the judiciary, they carry out what is known as judicial review. Particularly the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is empowered to review the legality of executive actions. This means that the executive acts beyond its constitutional powers. If the executive they act beyond their constitutional power, it's the judiciary that declares such actions unconstitutional. For example, the Constitutional Council is under the judiciary, and they are the one who are being vested with the power to test constitutionality of laws and actions. That's one. 2, we have protection of rights. The courts in Cameroon, they are crucial for the protection of the rights of citizens. So when the administration, when you carry out any unlawful action, any action that is not lawful, you will be liable as the administration. You will be liable before the administrative court. And again, I want to really bring up this matter of the administrative court. The administrative court is a court that hears matters in which the administration is involved. For example, in the administrative court, you have cases against the state of Cameroon. You get? So here now, the administrative judge will be prosecuting an individual against the state, or the state against you get. So now here, most often, this should just give you joy that it just the mere fact that you can drag an administrative authority to court, for example, like a mayor, a senior divisional officer, a governor, or even a minister, to court for having violated a particular your rights, or for having done something unlawful that affects you negatively. Now, at that time, or even let's say a court registrar or a magistrate or somebody, in the exercise of his duty, he is doing that thing in the name of the state of Cameroon, not in his name. If his name is let's say magistrate Takum Clovis, for example, you will not go to court and sue magistrate Takum Clovis. You go and sue the state of Cameroon, because he did whatever he did in the exercise of his duty as a civil servant. So now when you go, when you if the administrative court find the administration liable, what will happen is that the administration, most often the punishment they give to the government is just what, to pay a fine. They to pay a fine, and also maybe to pay for damages. Yes, because you cannot sentence the government to prison. Why? What do you think? You will not sentence the government to prison. The government is not an individual. You know that the government is not an individual. So the most often the kind of penalty or punishment that's given to the state is what, is a fine. The state will just pay a fine, and also pay for your damages that you claim. So the administrative court, you see, that is a way to control the administration, you see. And now let's talk about the judicial independence, because the judiciary really needs to be independent from the legislative and the executive, for there to be fair judgment, for there to be fair judgment, justice, for there to be justice and fairness. But now, the independence of the judiciary, if you read in the constitution says that the president of the republic shall ensure the independence of the judiciary. Now the question in your mind is, you, the president, you are the head of the executive. So how can you be the one now to ensure the independence of the judiciary? Now we'll look at the relationship that exists between the legislative and the judiciary, and this will be the last relationship we are going to be looking at. What are the relationships that exist between the legislative and the judiciary? The legislative, we are talking about the parliament. I would like you to know that the judicial appointment, the appointment of judges, right? The National Assembly or the parliament, they have a say in the appointment of judges, because the president is the one to appoint judges, so he is the one. But now the president is appointing those judges to come and do what? To come and interpret the law now that who has made the law that the parliament has made. So the parliament, they don't appoint judges, but they indirectly they propose how can I put it very clear? They simply have an indirect role in the appointment of judges. Yes. So now we can talk of what we have spoken about, the appointment of the judicial, the judges, right? Appointment of judges. Now we can talk about the impeachment. Yeah, under the relation of the legislative against or
in relation to the judiciary, I forgot to talk of the court of impeachment. After the administrative court, we also have the court of impeachment. The court of impeachment, which can hear matters concerning the president of the republic, matters like high treason, uh, and also the prime minister as well. They can be brought before they can be impeached by the National Assembly. So you see that it's another way of control, right? All right. Then now let's look at the role that the judiciary they play. The role of the judiciary in relation to the legislative. So now, first thing first, the judiciary, especially the Supreme Court, which is the highest law of the land, they have the power to interpret law that have been passed by the parliament. So when they are making the parliament make law, is this judiciary that come and interpret the law. So if any law is passed by the National Assembly or the Senate, uh, uh, and then the Supreme Court or the judiciary, the judges, they see that this law is violating the constitution, the judiciary would declare that law unconstitutional. It's a way of controlling the legislative. The judiciary, and also remember I said the president of the republic, according to the constitution, listen to this statement very well. This is how the statement is written in the constitution. The president of the republic, before promulgating bill into law, may refer the bill to the Constitutional Council to test the constitutionality of the law. So, first of all, there's something there. May refer the bill to the Constitutional Council. They have not said that the President of the Republic, before promulgating bill into law, will. They have not said will, but the Constitution say may. So it is now for the president to choose whether he will refer that bill to the Constitutional Council for them to test the constitutionality, or he will just promulgate into law. He is not under obligation to send it to the Constitutional Council. But in case he send it to them to test the constitutionality, you see that they have the right. The Constitutional Council has the right to say to declare that this law is unconstitutional. They have the right to say this particular part of this law is unconstitutional. Remove it. They have the right to even declare existing laws as unconstitutional if they are violating certain sections of the Constitution. So, as a result, there is a question that once came in NAM. The question was that what? The custodian of the Constitution in Cameroon. That was the question. So you now see from here, you're already seeing, from as I'm explaining, you're already seeing the custodian. When they say custodian, it means the keeper, the person who jealously keeps, guides this constitution. For example, in your various villages, you have custodian of tradition. That person is the one that whenever there's anything going on they have to consult him. Is this thing in accordance with our tradition? He will be the one to say yes. If he say he knows all the tradition, all I mean all. He knows all the tradition, both the in fact, all the traditions that have been practiced, the ones that have been abolished, the ones that are still ongoing, the ones that may come up as soon as possible, and so on. The custodian of tradition knows it. I did not grow up in the village, but then this is one of the things I even first of all learned it by in literature. Which text was that? I've forgotten. Custodian of tradition. Then before I realized that in our various villages, that's what is going on there. And also at the national level, we have what? The Constitutional Council. All right. Far from that, the judiciary, they also offer advisory role. They advise the legislative on the constitutionality of proposed law. When they propose law, the Constitutional Council, they can always advise they can always pass some advice in order to control that the constitutionality of that law. Then again, the judiciary, they ensure that the legislative arm of the government does not pass laws that are infringing upon fundamental rights guaranteed by the constitution and international treaties that have been ratified by Cameroon, like for example the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, the United Nations Charter on Human and People's Rights, and so on, the 1990 Liberty Laws, and so on. So the court, they have the power to strike down unconstitutional laws, ensuring that the legislative process does not violate constitutional principle or international human rights standards and treaties. Last, remember, laws are being passed by the parliament. When you read the constitution under the parliament or the legislative, you will see bills are being passed by what? The parliament. So when you read under the National Assembly, you see bills are being passed by the National Assembly. Or you read under the Senate, you see bills are being passed by the Senate. So they are the one that have the power to pass bills and vote those bills into law. But now, what about case laws? When I was speaking about Hans Kelsen's pure theory of law, I was outlining the hierarchy of norms, where I said laws are arranged in order of seniority, where inferior law always follow what superior law they are saying. Is a junior law always follow what senior law they are saying. For example, I cited that the highest law is the Constitution, and it runs down to what? The case laws. And now, under case laws, how do case laws come about? Case laws are court decisions. Most at times, decisions of the Supreme Court. How do matters... Remember, the Supreme Court is a court with appellate jurisdiction. When I say appellate jurisdiction, I mean a court that does not hear matters from fresh. The Supreme Court, we have courts that hear matters from fresh. I cannot offend you now, and then you carry me directly to the Supreme Court. You cannot have a problem with somebody now, and where you are taking the person is to the Supreme Court. It will not be possible at all. Each court has jurisdictions, but there are these two courts now, the appeal court and the Supreme Court, that they have what? Appellate jurisdiction. For example, at the Supreme Court now, you have the administrative bench, you have the judicial bench, and so on. And then it is when the decision of a lower court does not favor you, you can now come to the appeal court and appeal the matter there. And the appeal court, they will still sit again with more number of magistrates in odd number ratio, and then listen to your case, and they will pronounce their judgment. If you are not still satisfied, you can now come to the Supreme Court. It's at the Supreme Court that what will happen. The final decision will be pronounced. And I want you to know that the decision of the Supreme Court is unfortunately unappealable. It's res judicata, unappealable. What do I mean is that when the Supreme Court has decided, you are, whether you like it or not, you are bound to respect that decision, whether it is right or wrong, whether they are right or wrong. You are bound to respect the decision of the Supreme Court, because that's already the Supreme Court. If you disagree, where will we now go and appeal? So now, but where was I going to? I was going to case laws. In an area where there is a lack of law governing a particular situation, where there is no law, or there is a conflict between two laws on a particular situation, when that thing comes before the high court, you see the high court may simply just decide casually on in a particular way, and you will not be satisfied. You will take it ahead to the appeal court and finally to the Supreme Court, and there you see the Supreme Court now. They may come out with this part. They may treat it now as a case law. The Supreme Court judge now can now, since there is a conflict between two law on that same matter, or since there is no law governing that particular matter, the Supreme Court, they may just come out now with a law on that effect, and then of course from that day it becomes that particular case. Though they will take, let me not say a law, the Supreme Court, they will make a decision to that effect, and from that day the decision becomes a law. And now you see that in other courts in Cameroon now, they'll be applying it. They'll be applying that case law. So by the time a similar case comes now before the High Court, you hear that in the case of Gongan Jean-Claude Martin versus the state of Cameroon, this is what was said by the senior judge. So you see that they will now try to use that particular case law to address the matter, since there is no legislation on that particular situation, or there's a conflict. So you see that the judge can now make a law. Meanwhile, the judge was just supposed to interpret the law, but now in this kind of scenario, the judge will now take the place of the parliament to legislate, to make a decision become a law known as a case law. So you see, these are some interrelationship. Now we have checks and balances. I've explained TUSA. I've explained all this. Alright, so here we have come to the end of our today's lesson. Dear friends, I want to thank you for following up the lesson, and then I'll be inviting you to go through it, and then to go through it as many times as possible to exhaust, get the deepest part of it, as get it into you, and then feel free to ask your question anytime, and then we'll respond to you adequately. So I really want to encourage those who have been studying up to this level, and I'm just trusting that as you keep studying, working hard, by the time people will be smiling, you will also smile. So I really want to thank you for your commitment to studies. Also want to thank you for taking this course. Also, above all, I also want to thank you for trusting Acadex Cognitive. And I want to promise you that I, together with the various tutors on this platform, will continue to give in our best to make sure that young cadet Cameroonians who are aspiring for positions in the public service and otherwise will find their way into their dream professional schools. And equally, I also want to thank you for taking the lesson till the end. So thank you so much for watching, and see you in our next lesson. Bye.